Rav Shia Fear spoke by Chafna that I was once at, where the girl was from the Ukraine and the boy was from India. And Rav Shia says, when you see some of these, you know for sure Mashiach is coming. Because if Hashem pulled two people together, one from India, one from Ukraine, and brought them together in Toronto, clearly there's a Rebbeinu Shalom out there, and he has a plan for us, and he's gonna get us out of this goals as well. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, Valdik. So we are up to the Gemara right after the Mishnah that taught us all about the different Kedushians that are not the Raisha, like the Kedushin of the Cheresh and of the Chereshes. So we're ready to start. At the bottom of Daf Kuf Yud Beis Amud Beis, 7 lines for the bottom. Omar Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama said, "My shno Cheresh v'Chereshes to tekinu lo rabbanon nesuim." What's the difference? Why by a Cheresh and Chereshes did the rabbanon mesakin that they can get married? They can get married. They can get divorced. U'ma'isha the shoyte b'shoyte the lo tekinu lo rabbanon. By a shoyte, the rabbanon didn't make any allowance for a marriage. The Tanya we learned, shoyte v'koton shenosu, a shoyte or a koton who married. Of course, they married it. Their marriage is not recognized at all. Shenosu noshim, umeis when they died, nisher seim piturash v'nachalitzum ne'ivim, because there's no marriage recognized, not midaraisa, not midarabbanon. Zok Gemara, cheresh v'chereshes the kaimot akanta the rabbanon by a cheresh and chereshes, where is, as Rashi says, the kaimot akanta the rabbanon shedarkon liyoi shalom b'neim. They're saying they could possibly get along. It could possibly work. Afilu cheresh and chereshes, even if both of them are challenged. There, a marriage can survive. They have sanity. Aval shoita, but a shoita who's not of sound mind, even if one of the pair are healthy, ain't shalom b'neim. This is a marriage that's destined to corruption, not to corruption. It's destined to fall apart, and it can't work. So therefore, by a cheresh and chereshes, where the marriage has a chance to kinal hu rabbanon nesuin, but shoita v'shoita, the loy kaima, to kanta the rabbanon, simply won't work. And now the Gemara gets graphic. The ein adam dar im nachash v'kfiva achas. You cannot live with a snake in one little basket. In other words, you can't lock them up together and expect it to work. It's just going to be a disaster. Therefore, loy takinu rabbanon nesuin. The rabbanon were not masakin nesuin. You know, the Meforshim ask that a man and a woman were created as one, right? Adam Rishon had two parts from where one face of a man, one of a woman, and then Kadosh Baruch Hu separated them. And then what happens? The Rebbeinu says we'll make marriage. So why did you take them apart in the first place if you wanted them to come back together? The teretz is a man and a woman are so different. You lock them up in a household, it won't work. But if they were already one to one, maybe then you can get them reunited. To put two strange things that have no shaykh to each other together is impossible. To reunite them, if they're one to one, maybe then there's a chance. So here to put a shaita and the shaita b'kafif achas would be a disaster. But the kiner rabbanon and so on. Freit Gemara, okay, so that explains why a shaita doesn't have the rabbanon to marriage, but a ma'ishna katan to let the kiner rabbanon and so on. How come every katan can't get married by themselves? The cheresh to kinu loy rabbanon nesuin. So it's more cheresh to also l'chal nesuin, a cheresh who will never be able to come to marriage. So therefore, to kinu rabbanon nesuin, they found an eitzah for a cheresh to have a marriage. But katan, the asi l'chal nesuin, a katan that will come to a nesuin deraisa, they'll be able to marry themselves off with deraisa. They're like the kinu rabban nesuin because they'll be able to have the satisfaction of marriage. Katana, what about Katana? The Asi Lachlal Nesuin, the Tekinu Rabbanan Nesuin. What about Katana? The Katana Yesoima. The Rabban made it the Katana that her mother and her brothers could marry her off. Why do they make that the Katana? She's coming Lachal Gadlus. Eventually she'll be an adult and she'll be able to have a proper Nesuin. So why do they need to create this new structure of the Kedushin Rabbanan? So there it's only to protect her. As Rashi says, Eloi mutzah the mitzvah. If we can't make her a way to be able to get married, Ein law mi yishmerena. She doesn't have a father to protect her. Being hagibah minig hefker business, and therefore they're going to take advantage of her. So they made a special allowance to protect her, but it's not because they would have otherwise seen a reason to be misakin kedusha for them, because they're going to have anyway a proper marriage when they become adults. The Rabbanan set up a kedusha the Rabbanan for a Ketana to be able to be married her off through her mother or brothers. But she has a right to walk at any time. A Chereshes, who's also only a Rabbanan marriage, why doesn't the Chereshes have a right to walk at any time? So Dr. Gemara, I'll tell you why. It came Mimdi V'loy Nasvi. If a Chereshes had an easy way out, a unilateral way out, she could walk out of a marriage and the husband couldn't stop her, he's not going to want to marry her. In other words, it's hard enough to find somebody to marry a Chereshes. We don't want to make the Chereshes less appetizing. If we make it that the Chereshes can walk out of a marriage at any time, no one's going to want to marry a Chereshes in the first place. And Rashi explains why is it kind of different. But Rashi mimni v'lo nasvila hoylul oilam hi yichol l'moyin b'pnei cheshusa. So who wants to marry a woman who, if she gets into a bad mood, she could just walk? Avol katana, a katana gvul yeshla. Sure, she could be mamayim, but not forever. Only until she becomes a gedola. If we gave the Chereshes an ability to do miyun, it would be forever because her status doesn't change. Tana, it's only a temporary ability for her to be able to make miyun. The sovereign, and the husband says, "Okay, I could take care of her perfectly. I could fool her for a couple of years, until she's trapped, and then I could treat her the way I want to treat her. But a Chereshes that forever and ever I should have to treat her well. That's something I couldn't handle. Such a marriage I don't want to go into." So to Gemara, we're going to learn that a Kana can eat truma even if she's only married midirabanan. We allow her to eat truma. Rashi holds that it's only truma dirabanan that we allow her to eat. But a Chereshes who gets married with a dirabanan marriage, we will not allow her to eat even truma dirabanan. It's non-religion in the Mishnah. Hey, Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada. Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada said Eidos. Ala Chereshes shehesiya avia, on the Chereshes whose father married her off. So this is at the rise of the marriage. She just forget that she could go out with a get. The Katana Bas Yisrael and the Katana Bas Yisrael shenisas lakoyin shoyechelas b'truma. So what Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada is illustrating that there is a marriage. So what are the symptoms of the marriage of a Chereshes Asiyaviyah is that she needs a get. So you see that there's validity to the marriage. Once again, you see there's a validity to their marriage. But notice that Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada chose a different example by Ketana than he chose by Chereshes to illustrate the validity of the marriage. So that would clearly indicate that this Chelas B'Truma that is Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada's litmus test to illustrate that a Ketana is a good marriage. He doesn't use by a Chereshes. So obviously, Vilu Chereshes lo yachla. Vice the Chais, a Chereshes that got married with a marriage that was their abundant, she wouldn't eat. Zok to Gemara, what's the reason for that? Zok to Gemara, Gzeira Shema Yaichel Cheresh b'Chereshes. We're afraid that if a Chereshes who married a healthy kohen eats truma, then a Chereshes who marries a non-healthy kohen should eat truma. Rashi right off the bat says, right after that, Rashi says, "V'hai loy shinuya ma'al you." This isn't a good answer. So don't even scratch your head trying to figure out what it means. Let's just wait until the Gemara fears ice. What's the big deal? Let the Chereshes eat truma, even if it's wrong, because cotton oichol nevelis. The halacha is that if a cotton is oichol nevelis, if a cotton is big over nisher, you don't have to stop that cotton. You, of course, you're not allowed to feed a cotton nevelis, but if a cotton is doing an isser, you're not mechuyev to stop them. So what's the big deal? Why can't a chereshes eat truma? What would be the problem? Zok Gemara, I'll tell you what the problem is. If we allow a cheresh kohen to give to eat his wife a chereshes truma, we're afraid that if a cheresh is married to a healthy woman who is mechuyev in mitzvahs, we're afraid she'll eat truma as well, and she's already not allowed to eat truma. Well, why not? The cheresh b'pekachas nami leichel b'truma d'Rabbanan. Our discussion here is only to allow the eating of truma d'Rabbanan. So if the cheresh and the pekachas has a d'Rabbanan marriage, well then why can't the pekachas eat truma d'Rabbanan? It's a d'Rabbanan marriage. The teretz is because if you allow a pekachas, a healthy woman who's not legally or not midaraisa married to a kohen, if we allow her to eat truma d'Rabbanan, zera dilma asi la'oichla, we're truma d'Raisa. Then we're afraid that she'll come to eat truma d'Raisa. So there's a long road of xeris over here, but the starting point is we don't want the pekachas to eat truma d'Raisa, and therefore we don't even allow a pekei chumar cheresh to eat truma d'Rabbanan, because it will lead to eventually a pekachas eating truma d'Raisa. Right? So we're going through, we're comparing and contrasting the attributes of a marriage of a ketana to the marriage of a chereshes. So far, we discussed why we have miyun by ketana and not miyun by chereshes, because a person can be nice to his wife for a limited amount of time till she becomes a gdoila. But a chereshes, if we allowed miyun, he wouldn't want to marry her in the first place, because forever and ever, his marriage could be terminated just because she won't want to. We also learned that a chereshes would not be able to eat truma, although a ketana could eat truma. And now we're going to compare another item. We're going to look at another item where there's a difference between how we treat a ketana who got married to Rabban and the chereshes. Umayshna ketana, the isla ksuba, umayshna chereshes, the less law ksuba. Why is it that a ketana gets a ksuba and the chereshes does not? Tomorrow, you know why we don't insist that by chereshes the husband has to give ksuba to his wife? Is the imkain mimni yivloi nasfila. It's once again, it's hard enough to get people to marry without a ksuba. We're not going to put a ksuba on him as well. Otherwise, he's going to say, "I'm not going to marry this woman." It's funny that today there's a reverse ksuba, right? Today the girl has to give the boy money, but in the way it was really created was the ksuba is made for the boy to give to the girl. So the less ksuba, they became mimni v'loy nasfi, because then they all get married. Tana doesn't have that problem. Rashi says, if a man's marrying a chereshes, he knows she'll never be healthy, based on with normal circumstances, without special therapies that we have nowadays. But normally they assume this will be a condition that will be permanent. So such a woman it's harder for her to find the shidduch. Therefore, we don't enforce ksuba. But a ketana, people will marry because they know eventually she's going to mature and be an adult. So therefore, someone will be willing to give a ksuba. Uktana minol on this ksuba. We asked the question: why is it that a ketana gets ksuba, not a chereshes? But now we have to present the facts. How do I know, in fact, that a ketana gets a ksuba? The Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, hamima enes, a woman who is mamayin. So Rashi says right after that, less la ksuba. She doesn't get ksuba because she's leaving against his will. Ksuba is to make him think twice before he divorces his wife. If she's walking, he doesn't have to pay her ksuba. The hashniya, if this woman was ushered to him anyway, midrabanan, he doesn't pay her ksuba. But islandess or an islandess, ein lehen ksuba. When their marriage breaks up, there's no ksuba. And Rashi says the rabbanon kontsua by the shenis, there's no ksuba because we cancel her. She should never have married him in the first place. And then the islandess doesn't get a ksuba. Rashi says mishum demekach tos. So all of these women don't get their ksuba when they leave. Aval yoytze beget, but a normal woman who is yoytze beget or a ketana, yesh lo ksuba, they get ksuba. So there you see, here you see a ketana gets a ksuba. Rashi says, aval yoytze beget midiyuka de masnisim, from the dik of the Mishnah, the ketani mima'enes shemami no time mishum de balkor chinafka. You see that the reason why she loses her ksuba is because she leaves even against his will. But if he was megarisher and he wanted to dissolve the marriage, then Ishla she gets ksuba. Alma yesh ksuba luktana. So if we look again over here, and we see Abul Yosef beget, Rashi is telling us is not part of the Mishnah. The words of the Mishnah are Ma'enes gets ksuba, and the Gemara is very nice. Abul Yosef beget, but someone who's leaving because her husband is sending her away, and a Tana, then yesh lo ksuba, she would get ksuba. It's only if she left because she was b'mayim that she doesn't get ksuba. So that's how we know that a Tana gets ksuba. The chareshes minolan the less lo ksuba. Now how do we know that a chareshes does not get a ksuba? The Tanya we learn cheresh v'shoita shenasu b'chais, a cheresh or a shoita who married healthy women. Afapi shenispakeach hacheresh v'nishtafa shoita, even though after the marriage began they became healthy, nevertheless ein lahem aleihem klum. Based on history, if right now they decide that they want to divorce their wives, that there's no chiyuv ksuba. Like Rashi says on the first wide line, the ein lahem das. Up until that point, they had no das, and therefore, ein t'noi harishin t'nai. Any commitment that they might have made while they were not of sound mind is not a good night. V'afagav v'tikan rabbanon nesuin l'cherish lo'tekinu lo rabbanon ksuba. I'm sorry? A cherish could get along, but they still aren't classified as a gadol to the transactions should be valid. They just have enough sense that they won't kill each other. So we're going to get there. We're talking now even a shoita who became healthy, right? But if they want to continue their marriage, then moving forward, yesh lehem ksuba, they actually will have a ksuba, exactly like what you said. But we're talking about the commitment of the past. Does that count? So that does not count. But once they're healthy and they continue the marriage, avada is a ksuba. Change something what? No, it's because any commitment they would make, they don't have to keep because they're not a bardas. But if they become healthy, now they're a bardas. So now their commitment will. Right now, because she's going to come a gedola, we're not talking about the females. We're talking about the males. If a man is not of sound mind, then we cannot hold him liable for any obligation. We're not discussing yet if the female is. Yeah. See, let's look at the beginning of the record. Cheresh v'shoita. So the man, shenasu pikchos, they married healthy women. Even though in the middle of the marriage they suddenly became healthy, their prior commitment that they made when they were married, when they weren't healthy, never brought a chiyuv ksuba upon them. But once they're healthy, they want to continue the marriage, then yesh lam ksuba. Now we're talking about the other side. What if it's a healthy man who married a chereshes or shoita? Then avada, any commitment he makes is a good commitment. So even though we might not force him to give tshuva, but if he willingly made a commitment Because of mana, even if he wrote her a huge ksuba, if he was mechayiv himself, a huge amount for the ksuba, ksubasa kayemes. Why? If they should write to lotzuk b'nechasav, go knock yourself out. If you want to make a commitment, Chazal will not be mechayiv you in such a case to have a ksuba. But if you made a commitment, you're of sound mind, and of course your commitment is a good commitment. Rashi should write to lotzuk b'nechasav. It's not mandatory. He didn't have to promise her anything. But Hareyu Kosovla, he on his own decided that he wanted to accept upon himself to give a ksuba. However, right to the hafsid, since he willingly made that commitment, he's mechuyev to fulfill his tonight. He's of sound mind. Zok Gemara, time of the Ratza, we see that only if he willingly on his own wants to make that commitment is there a commitment. Haloi Ratza, if he didn't want to give ksuba to a chereshes or a shaita, there's no ksuba. Why? Repeating what the Gemara said even before we proved the point. The reason why we don't force someone who marries a chereshes to give ksuba is because people will avoid, they won't want to marry such a woman, and we're trying to solve the shidduch crisis. In fact, Gemara, ihachi bekachas l'cheresh liskin lakshuba. If a cheresh marries the bekachas, why don't we also make a takana or that he should bedafka give it ksuba? Why? Because it works two ways. She won't want to marry him either. So in order to make him desirable, so that she should be willing to marry him, let him be mechayiv himself. Let the Rabbanon, even though a cheresh's commitments are useless, but the Rabbanon have the ability to encumber even a cheresh. So let the Rabbanon encumber the cheresh so that he'll be more desirable, so women will want to marry him. So tomorrow we're not worried. This is a very chauvinistic Gemara. Yoiser Misha Ish writes to Lisa, Isha writes to Linose. A woman, we have to make her desirable, otherwise no one's going to want to marry her. A man, even though he's a cheresh, someone's going to take him. Someone's going to take him. I can get thrown off of YouTube for that. I'm not sure. Okay, let's see what Rashi says. Let's see what Rashi says. Oh, there's no Rashi here. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. Even Rashi was afraid of getting thrown off YouTube. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. Hahu cheresh, the Hava b'shevavusei Rav Machia. There was a cheresh who was living under the influence of Rav Machia. So Rav Machia wanted to marry him off. So what did Rav Machia do? Anseve itza v'chosavla arba meyezuzei minichse. Rav Machia took money that the cheresh had. The cheresh was not a bardas, and Rav Machia committed the cheresh's money so that he could find a woman that would be willing to marry this man. So Omar Rabbah commented on the wisdom of Rav Machia to do this. Man chakim Rav Machia. This again is a little bit of a chauvinistic Gemara. Man chakim Rav Machia. Look what a smart man Rav Machia is in that he took the cheresh's money and committed it to this woman, even though the cheresh alone cannot his chayvus wouldn't work because he's not a bardas. The Gava Rabbahu, Rav Machia is a great man. He knew what to do. Because this was his calculation. Ilu ratza shivcha l'shamshay. Let's say this cheresh needed an attendant in his home to take care of him. He would have had to hire domestic help. Mi loizav ninilei. Wouldn't Bezdin use the assets of the cheresh in order to help the cheresh, and they wouldn't have bought him a shivcha to service him? Here, for 400 zuz, he's getting 2 for the price of 1. Sai, he's getting a domesticated helper, and Sai, he's getting a wife. What a good deal! What a good deal! What a great idea this was. Gavalti. So basically, it's a good deal. It's a good deal for the cheresh to spend $400 in the ksuba, because that's what he would have had to spend anyway, just to buy the services of a domesticated helper to clean his house, to do his laundry. So here he got a free wife. for it as well. What a good deal. If you notice, Rashi also doesn't make any comment on this either, on this story of Rav Chia. Eishes Cheresh, the wife of the Cheresh, ein chayavna la'ashim tov. So this is an important lomdus here. If one has relations with an Eishes Ish, but she's not married midaraisa, she's married midarabanan, you don't even bring in ashim tov. And Rashi explains, don't say that the marriage of the Cheresh that's not valid. It's not vaday not valid. We're mesupik if he has enough das to marry a woman. No, because if we're mesupik, then if someone was born this woman, she's a suffik Eishes, and they would have to bring a carbon ashim toli. Zokt Shmuel, it's not a suffik at all. Don't say it's a suffik. The name is suffik Eishes ish who. Eishes ish he. In other words, suffik hoya by das. Maybe there was das when this Cheresh married this woman. Suffik ain boy, or maybe there wasn't. So it's the suffix if this marriage is a valid marriage, and therefore if someone has intimacy with this woman, it's a suffix if he was over on being bought on al Eishes, and therefore don't say that. Rather, the vadai ein loy shum kinyan min haTorah. We're 100% sure that there's no kinyan whatsoever. So therefore, someone who's born as an Eishes, who's married by a Cheresh, it's not a mitzvah, of course, because it's a marriage to Rabbanon, but there's no havamina that there's any deraisa problem which would require that someone bring even an ashim tov. Lema Messiah. Let's see if we could bring a brisa to prove Shmuel's halacha once again that the status of a cheresh is that he vadai has no das and there's no havamina, because we're going to soon learn that there were two ways to look at a cheresh. You could look at it from one perspective where he for sure has no das. Ever. Or maybe a cheresh swings in and out of clarity. And therefore, we can't treat his wife like a Eishes vadai, because maybe at the moment that he made kedushin, he didn't have clarity. But maybe he did. And therefore, it's a suffix. So at this point, Shmuel is saying, there's no suffix here at all. A cheresh never has das, and we're 100% sure, in fact, that the kedushin was not a good kedushin. So let's bring a raya to Shmuel. There are 5 people who should not take truma because their truma would not be valid. Vintarmu, and even if they took truma, ain trumas on truma, their truma has no validity. There's no chiyuv to give it to a kohen. You can eat it when it's tamei. It's regular chul. Who are these 5 people? Cheresh, which is what's relevant to us. Shoita, the cotton. Va'atorim eshein shaloi, and someone who takes truma from somebody else's produce, provided that he wasn't specifically appointed by the owner as a shliach, or an ovid kechavim, even if he was appointed as a shliach, an ovid kechavim cannot be a shliach to be mafish truma. Shetaram shal Yisrael, afilu b'shos Yisrael, even if he got permission from the Yisrael, ain truma soy truma. There's no din truma. So you see from here the fact that the truma of a cheresh, the Brisa says for sure it's not even a suffix truma, it's vadai not truma. So here you have proof positive, like Shmuel's Yisoid, that a cheresh is always considered not a bardas. So the same way his truma is not a good truma, his marriage is not a valid marriage either. Zoktama, you don't have a raya from this Brisa. Maybe in fact Shmuel does not hold like this Brisa. Maybe Shmuel holds it is a suffix. But what does Shmuel hold? Who Dama Rabbi Eliezer? Maybe Shmuel holds, like Rabbi Lozer. Maybe Shmuel holds like Rabbi Lozer. And in fact, it's a suffix, but even though it's a suffix, Rabbi Lozer Shita would say that it wouldn't work. The Tanya Rabbi Yitzchak Kaimer Mishum Rabbi Lozer, Trumas Cheresh, Loi Teitze Lechulin, Mipnei Shu suffix. Maybe Shmuel holds it is a suffix. Maybe Shmuel does not necessarily hold like the Brisa we just quoted that says Vadei Ein Trumas and Truma. And maybe it's a suffix. And if that's the case, why is it that you don't bring Nashim Toli? If you're going to say that the Truma B'Cheresh is a suffix, why is it a suffix? Because maybe the Cheresh did have Das, and that's why if the Cheresh took Truma, we have to treat it suffix as Truma. Well, then if a Cheresh marries a woman, we have to treat that misafik as a marriage. Well, if a woman is suffolk married midaraisa, suffolk not, and someone is bola, surely they should have to bring a nashim tali. How would you understand Shmuel if he holds that a cheresh is a suffix? How would you explain what Shmuel said that a nashim tali wouldn't be necessary? Because not every time you were over a suffix chayvik krisus, do you automatically bring a nashim tali. That's not the case. Rather, only if you had vaday huchzik yisurim. So if you have a piece of meat and you're not sure if it's chaylev, you're not sure if it's shumin, and you eat it, you would not bring a nashim tali. If you had two pieces of meat, you know one was for sure chaylev and one was for sure shumin, and which means we know there was for sure isser here, and you don't know which piece of meat you ate, then you bring a nashim tali because there was huchzik yisur here. So therefore, even though this woman, it's a suffix, if she's a nation ish or not, that wouldn't bring a nashim tali. Where will you bring a nashim tali? If there are two women in the house, one was your wife and one was your sister-in-law, one of them you're mutter to have relations with, one of them you're chayav curse if you have relations with, and at night it's pitch black, they didn't have lights in those days, and someone has relations with a woman, and the next morning there's two women there, and he doesn't know, did he have relations with his wife or did he have relations with his sister-in-law? Don't ask me practical questions how that happened. I don't know how it happened. But whatever the case is, there was for sure an isser in the home, and he has a suffix if he was boil his wife or boil the isser, that's where there would be a nashim tali. But one woman that it's a suffix, the halal if she's a nation ish, so it's not huchzak yisura. For that you don't bring a nashim tali, and that's why maybe that's the explanation why Shmuel holds you don't bring a nashim tali, but not because it's vaday no das. Maybe it's a suffix. Does the Rabbi Lazar, the Tana, hold that you're not chayav a nashim tali unless it's vaday huchzak yisura? But Tani we learn Rabbi Lazar Omer kvi. A kvi is a suffix chaya, suffix behema. If it's a behema, you're not allowed to eat the chaylev of a behema. But if it's a chaya, one is allowed to eat the chaylev of a chaya. So what if somebody ate the chaylev of a kvi? Chayavin al chel with nashim tali. You're chayiv for eating its chaylev and nashim tali. So clearly Rabbi Lazar doesn't hold of this huchzik yisur.
Where are you going?
I said a moment ago.
Oh, yeah, we usually go to the Avenue Road and get on right.
Clearly, he doesn't hold of this. Rabbi Lazar holds even a suffix isser brings a nashim tali. So tomorrow, okay, could be. Shmuel suffix Rabbi Lazar b'chada, u'padala b'chada. We can argue that Shmuel holds the cheresh, and Shmuel agrees that a cheresh is a suffix like Rabbi Lazar, but he also holds, unlike Rabbi Lazar, that you don't bring a nashim tali on the suffix. Now Rashi just gives us some background, some reasoning. First of all, Rashi tells us that an nashim tali that one brings does not give him a kapara. It only keeps him safe from oinshim until we get clarity as to what happened. So if he finds out eventually that he was over the isser, then in fact he has to bring a carbon chatas. Nashim tali is just tali. It keeps him safe from any type of oinshim up until he finds out that he actually was over, and if he was actually over, then he has to bring the carbon chatas. That's the first piece of information that Rashi shares with us. The other piece of information is, why would you say that you need huchzak yisura by a nashim tali? It's a suffix isser. Why would you need to have that for sure there was isser here, and you're not sure if you ate a piece of meat that was chaylev, or if you ate a piece of meat that was shuman? So Rashi says, we learn that from the pasuk. It says, someone who did achas mikol mitzvahs Hashem, and it's read as if there's decreed as if there are two vavs, which means chada mitarte. Mitzvahs Hashem means there's two things here. The limit is from the way the word is pronounced. It sounds like there's two things here, meaning two things: one of Isser, one of Heter, and you got confused. You don't know if you ate the chaylev. You don't know if you live with the woman that was mutter to you or also to you. So that's where the Svar, the Tana who holds that you have to have Huchzak Yisura, learns it from that pasuk. There was another version as how the whole story went down, and it's exactly the opposite of what we quoted. So rather than quoting Shmuel as saying that there's no Hashem Tali, we're quoting Shmuel saying there is a Nashim Tali, because it's a suffix if the Cheresh has das or not. Meisvei, we asked the Kasha from the same Mishnah that we a moment ago brought a raya from, in the other version. Travel. And the Gemara answers, maybe Shmuel doesn't hold like this brisa, that a Cheresh is a vade, not a b'das. Maybe hold like a Belazar, that a Cheresh is a suffix b'das. So now the Gemara says there's two ways to understand why a Cheresh's marriage wouldn't work when it's a suffix. So we say Rabbi Lazar, or in one version Shmuel, holds that the marriage of a Cheresh, it's a suffix if it's a good marriage or not. What exactly is the suffix? Boy Rabash, my time at the Rabbi Lazar. What is this for Rabbi Lazar that it's a suffix? Do you say Mibshat Pshitalei, the Cheresh died to Kalishtavu? One thing is a given. A Cheresh is not healthy. He doesn't have full-time, clear thought process. However, Umiyu Misavkalei, he died to Tzalusa. He love died to Tzalusa. Ula Chada died to him. Do we say whatever level of understanding and of comprehension and of awareness that a Cheresh has, it's steady, it's consistent. And the question is, this level of understanding doesn't meet the threshold of understanding that would be required for the truma to be a good truma, for the marriage to be a good marriage. So is that his suffix? The Cheresh is in a steady state, and the question is, does that steady state meet the threshold of clear reason so that his transaction should be valid? Is that shot in the suffix? He knows for sure that his das is not good, but the love died at Salusu, and his mind is not clear. So what's the suffix? If he's for sure that his mind is not clear, so then it should be pashut that his transactions are no good. But maybe a Cheresh is not stable, he's not steady, and there are times where he does have clear mind, and he is of sound mind, and his transactions would be valid, and there are times not. So the reason why his marriage is a suffix is because at the moment that he made the kedushin, we're not sure if he was of sound mind at that moment. So is the suffix? Is the suffix that the Cheresh is of a steady state of mind? We don't know if that meets the threshold, and therefore it's a suffix if his marriage is valid, or if he's not of a steady situation. Sometimes he's clear, sometimes he's not, and the suffix is at the moment that he made the kedushin, was he of sound mind? Lamai nafkamina. What's the difference between these two options? Either way, his marriage is a suffix. That's more poshut. Lahaiti used to beget. Could he be mighty his wife for the get? Yamet chada daitahu. If you hold that he has his mindset is of a steady state, therefore he could give a get because kedushin kach gerushin. Whatever state he was in when he gave the kedushin, he's in when he gives the gerushin. So if he is of sound mind and the kedushin was good, well then the gerushin will be good. And if he's not of sound mind, then the kedushin wasn't good anyway. So this woman is free. But the amrit idim chalam vitim shoita, if you say that his state of mind is not steady, so then it's possible that when he made the kedushin, he was of sound mind, and when he's giving the get, he's not of sound mind. So now she can never get a get. Because then kedushin matzah mekadosh, but Yerushalayim matzah megarish, shmai, take it. So the suffix, if a cheresh can release his wife with a get. I'm sorry?
Bigger problem with kedushin.
Why?
Maybe the kedushin is not good and he's living with this lady.
Okay, but there's no, that's not an issue that Raisha, that's a pnuya. It's a lav, at worst it's a lav. But if she's not megureshus and someone lives with her, that's an eshes shish, that's a chiv chenek. Okay, so let's see what Rashi says.
Business is not a problem.
What's that?
I want you guys to say I'm crazy, but I'm not stupid.
Very good. Okay, let's go back to I was in the Rashi, but we have to finish all of it. So let's go back in the status. So now we're talking about a case. If a woman becomes a shoita, we cannot give her a get, right? We can't give her a get. And we already know the reason for it. We already know what the Gemara is going to say. It's because we have to protect her. If we allow her to be divorced, then she'll be taken advantage of. So Amar B'Yitzchak, Dvar Torah, Shoita Miskereshes. Avada, you could divorce midaraisa, a get works on a shaita. Midi de hava pekachas. It's no difference than if she was a pekachas and she refused to take the get. Balkorcha, you can give her a get against her will. So you for sure can give her a get if she has no will at all. So matam over any migureshes. So why, in fact, did Chazal say you're not allowed to give a get to your shaita? It's shaloyin hagu b'amig hefker, because she won't be able to protect herself, and then people will take advantage of her. Hey chadam, what's the case over here? Ilema the idas lishmar gita. If she's a shaita, but she is aware enough that she needs to hold on to her get and protect her get, and the idas lishmar atzma, and she's also of sound enough mind that she won't let someone take advantage of her. Why would there be a concern? Ella, we're obviously talking about a woman. She's speaking about a woman who's totally irresponsible, and therefore, the same way she won't be able to protect herself from predators, she won't watch her get. So you're telling me such a woman who can't even hold on to her get, the Vartoya Shaitim is Kareshes, that Midaraisa would be good get? It says you could only be Megarish, a woman who you could put the get in her hand, and meaning she's in control of that get. A woman who can't even hold on to her get, it wouldn't work at all. So you're telling me that there's a type of woman that has enough das that the get works with her Isa, but she's still not protecting herself. Who is that? What type of woman can you give a get to? Someone who's aware enough that when you reject her and you send her away, she goes and she doesn't come back. That's one of the definitions of a shoita, is someone who comes back even after they know that you've rejected them. Rashi says, a normal person doesn't make themselves that cheap. If you don't want me, I'm out of here. But a shoita doesn't have that and continues pushing themselves on you, even though you don't want them. The woman that we're talking about, whose get would be valid, but would be in danger of being taken advantage of if she was mugareshes, is a woman, the yadas lishmar gita, the eni yadas lishmar atzma. She's a woman who, yes, she has enough awareness that she can hold on to her get, and she knows that she is mugareshes, but she's not smart enough, savvy enough to prevent men from taking advantage. So so technically the get works with the Raisa, Yadas lishmar gita. But don't divorce a woman like that. If you look at the wording of the Mishnah, it actually makes sense to say that it's only b'derabbanan. The Katani Gabedida, when the Mishnah discusses a woman who became a shaita, it says nishtatis lo yotzi. He shouldn't divorce her. The Gabedida, but when we're talking about a man who became a shaita, the lashon of the Mishnah is lo yotzi elamis. He could never get rid of her. Maish nahacha the Katani elamis. Why, when it's talking about a man becoming a shaita, it says he could never give again. Umaish nahasam the loy Katani elamis. When it refers to a woman who's a shaita, it doesn't say lo yotzi elamis. It must be when the Mishnah says lo yotzi elamis. That's because it's technically impossible for a shaita to give a get. But a woman who even a shaita can sometimes be makabel a get, it only says lo yotzi because it's only the derabbanan preventing the get from happening. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said, he made a comment on what the Tanakhama said, and what Rabbi Yochanan was talking about is he says why could a woman who doesn't have das, why could she accept the get? But a man who lost his mind, cannot give a get. They answered, a woman who doesn't need das for a get, because you can even be megash for balkarchai. Therefore, even though she's a shaita, you can give her a get. But a man needs das. That's why if he's a shaita, the get won't work. So the Gemara wants to delve down a little bit into this transaction that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri had. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, was he trying to bring a raya from the ish to the isha? Because he knew for sure what the halach is by the ish. and he wanted to say that should apply to the Isha as well, or vice versa. He knew what Allah is by Isha, and he wanted to know why it's an Ish different. You say Ish Pshitale, the Isha come by like, and he wants to know why is it that a woman could get a get without das if a man cannot give it without das? Idilma Isha Pshitale, or maybe he not understands that an Isha could be Makabal get without das. The Ish come by and he wants to know why is an Ish any different. Tashma. We can bring a raya. What did they respond from the response of the Tanakama to Rabbi Yochanan Benuri? We can get an insight as to what Rabbi Yochanan Benuri was saying. And what did they tell him back? There's no comparison between an ish hamagarish and an isha. So from that response, Mami, no, it's clear that what Rabbi Yochanan Benuri was saying was ish kamabayla. Because we were saying an ish should be, the Tanakama answered him that an ish should be just like an isha. So obviously his question is, what's the situation with the ish? Correct, Gemara, I don't think so. Adarabba, when he's told them, Avsu, so a woman should be like a man, Shmamina, Isha kamibayla. I'm sorry, Avsu kayotzeba. So too, a woman who doesn't have das should be just like a woman who's taking a get against her will. Clearly, you see, the question was the status of the woman. Shemamina Isha kamabayla. Ella, the conversation wasn't Rabbi Yochanan independently declaring. Rather, it was Rabbi Yochanan. He was commenting on the words of the Tanakama. He said, "Lididi, according to me, Rabbi Yochanan held B'shita. You can't give a woman a get if she's a shaita, and a man can't give a get if he's a shaita." He was commenting on the Rabbanan seemingly difference between a man and a woman. Who you hold as a difference, I would ask, why do you look at Isha any different than you look at Ish? So Rabbi Yochanan wasn't Mesupach at all. He knows what's the status of Ish, he knows the status of Isha. He's asking the Tanakama, why are they inconsistent? They told him, hey, Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudla. Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudla was the one who said, Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudla is the one who said that a Chereshes, whose father married her off, that she can go out with a get. Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says. Amarava, Meidusa Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudla. From the Edus of Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudla, we see the following halach. Amar la'ed. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudla says that you can give a get against the wife's will, and once she accepts it, she's megureshes. So what happens if Amar la'edim, a guy wants to give his wife his get, but he's such a wimp wuss, he can't look her in the eye while he gives her a get. So what does he do? He goes to Edim and he says, Ru'u gets it, Shani Nation, look at this. This is a valid get. Confirm? Confirm. Then he goes and tells her, because he doesn't have the guts and the backbone to look her in the eye and give her a get, my dear wife, I want you to have this shtar chayv. Someone owes me $100,000. Can you hold on to this for me so that we don't lose the money? That's a kosher get, because she doesn't have to accept it knowingly. So you don't even have to tell her to get. Once she has it in her hand, she's megureshes balkarachai. That's what we learned from Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudla. Milay Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudla. Didn't Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudla in our Mishnah say loy ba'in daita? You don't need her das to receive a get. Hachanami loy ba'in daita. So too over here, she doesn't even have to know that she's accepting a get, and therefore he can give her get in this way, even though she doesn't know that it's a get that she's receiving. Fekemar pshita. Why would I say otherwise? What's the great chiddush here? That's very true. She doesn't have to accept the get with das. You might have thought that he made it worse. Since when he's handing her the get, he's telling her it's a shtar chayv, maybe those words are betula batla. Maybe by saying those words, he's being mevatel his get. A person has a right to say, my get should no longer be valid. Even though it's written properly, everything's perfect about it, if you invalidate it with your words, it's not valid. So maybe by him telling his wife that this is shtar chayv, he's invalidating his get. Kamash malon, that no, he's not invalidating it, because he said the mevatle. If he was planning to be mevatel this get, la'edim have a kamarlu. He would have told the edim that I'm being mevatel this get. But to the Eidim, he didn't do that. To the Eidim, he told him it is a get. Since he didn't tell the Eidim that he's being mevatel to get, loy botlei v'loy midi. He wasn't mevatel. So why is he telling his wife that this is a shtar choy rather than identifying it as a get? It's because he's a wimp wuss and he can't look his wife in the eye and give her a get, so he's telling her that it's a shtar choy. And now, even though it's 6:52, and we're going to learn this tomorrow, where's Chaim Tzvi? This is Chaim Tzvi's favorite Gemara in the whole world. Because the Satmar Rebbe was once having a conversation with somebody. And someone told the Satmar Rebbe, why are you Satmar so fanatic? Little kids, when they're 3 years old, you have to separate girls and boys. When they're older, in the 3rd, 4th grade, you separate them. But such little kids, come on, you're too fanatic. And I'll bring you a riot that you're too fanatic. Because of this story in this Gemara. The Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Bizna, once upon a time, he dropped and he lost the keys to shul in Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos. So first, he didn't know where they were. But even if he found them, he couldn't pick them up and move them over. So what's he going to do? Because Medrash is law. So what did they do? They came to Rapadas to ask, what should we do? How should we deal with this? How are we going to get to shul? Amr Lei, he told them, Zil Devar Tali Vitalia, go gather and bring young boys and young girls and let them play together in that area. Let them play together in that area, because if they're playing there, the mashkuchalahu, if they find the keys, maisilahu, they'll bring the keys. So I don't want to get into what has to get to our sugya, but I have to share the story. So they proved to the Satmar Rebbe, little boys and little girls could play together. So the Satmar Rebbe said, Adarabba. From there, you see, they could never play together. Because if you put boys and girls together, the boys aren't going to look up because they don't want to see the girls. They're going to only be looking down at the floor the whole time. And that's how they're going to find the keys, because they're looking down. That's what the Satmar Rebbe answered. Okay, Gavaldi. Let's stop here. Yes, we had it in Shabbos. We had it a couple of times.